I'm going to switch gears here now and do something different. You've been looking at cryptids and this just happened 11 minutes ago. Deep in the Appalachian Mountains, countless hikers, hunters, and campers have reported something they cannot explain. For decades, this has been happening. So let's go ahead and get into the video and everything like that. And I'll switch another gear too again about Madonna's wife going full terrorist mode in New York. Want to drop bombs and shit like that. We'll get into that too. If I can get it to come up, that is. A lot of stuff going on here I'm trying to cover. I also got it Friday and Saturday, but I took the time off. So yeah, I get caught up on that. So yeah, there's a lot of crap I gotta get done. Here we go, right here. I get that next one too. Oh, let's get back to the Dogman one and everything like that, because there's a lot of stuff going on in these trails. People catching, sighting Dogmans and everything, stuff like that. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into that video, shall we? Enjoy. And it's over an hour long, so I'm not going to give a whole hour. I might just give like 20 minutes, maybe less than that. If you want to watch the full story about the Dogman, you can go on the channel here and everything. So let's go ahead and get into it, shall we?
In the Appalachian Mountains for decades, hunters, hikers, and even experienced woodsmen have reported seeing the same terrifying figure moving between the trees at night. A towering creature with the body of a man and the head of a wolf. Most people dismiss these encounters as exaggerations or misidentified animals. But when you start comparing the details from different witnesses, a disturbing pattern begins to appear. Many of these encounters follow the exact same sequence. First, the forest goes completely silent. Then comes a powerful musky smell drifting through the trees. And finally, the feeling that something large is watching you from the darkness. Some witnesses claim they only saw glowing eyes in the woods. Others describe a massive upright predator observing them before disappearing without a sound. But one night, deep in the Appalachian wilderness, I experienced something far more unsettling. I didn't just hear the stories. I didn't just see tracks in the mud. I came face to face with one of these creatures, and what happened next made me realize something that most people completely misunderstand about the Dogman, because the creature wasn't hunting me, it was studying me. And that night in the mountains, I began to understand what might really be living in those forests. I never believed the stories people told about the mountains, not the old tales passed down by hunters or the warnings whispered by loggers around dying campfires. To me, the Appalachians were simply ancient forests and forgotten trails, a place where fog moved slowly between ridges and the wind carried the scent of pine and wet soil. I had grown up near those mountains and spent most of my life exploring them, hiking their trails and camping beside their quiet streams. The idea that something unknown lived there always sounded like folklore meant to scare children. But everything I thought I knew about those woods changed during one night that I can never forget. It began with a sound that did not belong to any animal I had ever heard before. A sound that felt wrong the moment it reached my ears. The evening had been calm when I arrived at the trailhead, the sky fading into deep shades of blue behind the jagged silhouette of the Appalachian ridges. I planned to hike several miles before setting up camp near an old fire tower that had been abandoned for decades. The forest seemed peaceful, almost welcoming, the kind of quiet that makes a person feel small beneath towering trees. I remember thinking how strange it was that these mountains were older than most civilizations. Every step along the trail felt like walking through history. But somewhere deep inside the forest, something else was listening to those footsteps. Something that had been there long before I arrived. About 2 hours into the hike, the sun disappeared completely, leaving the forest wrapped in thick Appalachian darkness. My headlamp carved a narrow path of light across the trail, illuminating branches and rocks, while the rest of the woods dissolved into shadow. It was around that moment that I noticed the first sign that something was wrong. The forest had gone completely silent. No insects, no owls, not even the distant rustle of deer moving through leaves. It felt as if the entire mountain had suddenly stopped breathing. The silence pressed against my ears like a warning I could not yet understand. Then came the smell. Anyone who spends time in the wilderness learns to trust their nose, because scents often reveal what the eyes cannot see. This one hit me like a wall. It was thick, musky, and carried a sour undertone that reminded me of wet fur and rotting bark. At first I assumed a bear might be nearby, since black bears roam those mountains often. But the scent was stronger than anything I had ever encountered before. It felt ancient, heavy, almost like the smell of something that had lived too long in the shadows of the forest. My instincts told me to leave the trail immediately. I turned off my headlamp and stood still, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness while my ears searched for any movement. The Appalachian night is never truly silent, yet now it felt like the entire forest was holding its breath. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then somewhere deep between the trees, I heard a low growl that vibrated through the ground itself. It was not the growl of a wolf, and it was far deeper than anything a coyote could produce. The sound carried intelligence behind it, almost like a warning rather than a threat. Whatever made that noise knew exactly where I was standing. I slowly switched the headlamp back on and scanned the tree line. The beam of light moved across trunks and tangled branches but revealed nothing. Yet the feeling of being watched grew stronger with every passing second. Hunters often describe that sensation when a predator is nearby. It's a primal instinct buried deep inside the human mind. In that moment, my entire body told me something was stalking me from the darkness. I just couldn't see it yet. Another growl echoed through the woods, this time closer. My chest tightened as the sound rolled between the trees like distant thunder. It was followed by the unmistakable crack of a branch snapping under enormous weight. Whatever was moving out there was far too large to be a normal animal. The sound came from a ridge just beyond the trail, maybe 50 yards away. I aimed my headlamp toward the slope, expecting to catch the reflection of eyes. Instead, the light revealed something far more disturbing. Huge footprints pressed deep into the muddy ground beside the trail. Each print was longer than my forearm and shaped like the track of a massive canine. Yet they were spaced far apart as if the animal walked upright at times. The depth of the impressions suggested incredible weight. I knelt beside one of them, my heart pounding as I realized the tracks were fresh. Whatever left them had passed through only minutes before I arrived. That meant it could still be nearby, watching me from the darkness. Suddenly, a long howl erupted from the forest. It was unlike anything I had ever heard in my life. The sound began like a wolf's call, but twisted into something deeper and almost human before fading into the Appalachian night. The howl echoed across the mountains, bouncing between distant ridges as if answering voices were waiting somewhere beyond the valley. In that moment, I understood why locals avoided certain trails after sunset. Some secrets hidden in those forests were never meant to be found. My heart was racing now, and every instinct told me to turn back toward the trailhead. But curiosity held me there longer than it should have. I wanted to see the thing that left those tracks. I wanted proof that the stories were real. Slowly, I followed the line of footprints leading off the trail and into the trees. Each step I took felt heavier than the last. The forest around me seemed darker, thicker, almost alive with tension. After only a few yards, the tracks stopped abruptly. The ground ahead was covered with leaves and broken branches, making it impossible to see where they continued. I lifted my headlamp higher and scanned the trees once more. That's when I saw movement. Something tall had just slipped between two trunks about 30 yards away. For a brief second, the beam of my light reflected off a pair of glowing eyes, staring back at me from the darkness. The shape that stood there was wrong in every possible way. It was far too tall to be a wolf, and far too broad to be any man I had ever seen. Its head carried the unmistakable outline of a massive canine. Yet its body stood upright like a human silhouette against the trees. Thick fur covered its shoulders, while long arms hung at its sides, ending in clawed hands. The creature did not run when the light touched it. Instead, it simply watched me, completely still, as if deciding what to do next. I realized then that the legends about the Dogman were not just campfire stories told to scare travelers. Something ancient lived in those mountains, something powerful and intelligent enough to avoid humans for generations. And on that night, deep in the Appalachian wilderness, I had just become one more witness to its existence. The worst part was the expression in those glowing eyes. They did not show confusion or fear. They showed recognition, as if the creature had been watching humans for a very long time. Asterisk, for several seconds, neither of us moved. The beam of my headlamp cut through the darkness and rested directly on the figure standing between the trees, revealing just enough to confirm that what I was seeing was not a trick of the light. The creature remained perfectly still, its towering silhouette framed by the black outlines of ancient Appalachian oaks. Even from 30 yards away, I could sense the sheer size of it. Its shoulders were massive, wider than any human I had ever seen, and its posture was upright in a way that made the entire scene feel unnatural. Predators usually avoid light, but this one didn't retreat. It simply stood there, watching me, studying me, almost like a hunter deciding whether I was worth the effort. My first instinct was pure survival. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to slowly back away and return to the trail. But something about the creature's presence held me frozen in place. I had spent years in the wilderness and encountered bears, coyotes, and even wild boar, yet none of those encounters carried the same weight as this moment. This thing radiated intelligence. The way it held its head slightly tilted, the way its glowing eyes followed every small movement I made, told me it was not acting on simple animal instinct. It was calculating, observing, learning. Asterisk, the creature finally shifted its weight and stepped forward into the weak glow of my headlamp. That single movement revealed far more than I was ready to see. Its legs bent in a strange hybrid structure, powerful like a wolf's hind legs, but supporting an upright body like a man's. Thick dark fur covered most of its frame, but patches of skin around the chest and throat looked rough and scarred, almost ancient. Its arms were long and muscular, ending in clawed hands that hung slightly forward like those of a primate. The head was unmistakably canine, with a long snout and sharp ears that twitched slightly as if tracking every sound in the forest. I remember the smell reaching me again as the creature stepped closer. The musky scent I had noticed earlier now felt overwhelming, thick and almost suffocating in the cool mountain air. It carried the unmistakable odor of wet fur, old earth, and something metallic beneath it, like rust or dried blood. That smell alone told me this was a predator that had spent its life deep inside the wilderness. My mind struggled to process what I was seeing. Every logical explanation collapsed under the reality standing before me. Asterisk. Then something happened that made the situation far more terrifying. The creature slowly lifted its head toward the ridge behind me and released a low, rumbling growl. It was not directed at me. Instead, it seemed like a signal, a warning sent into the surrounding forest. The sound rolled across the trees and disappeared into the dark valleys of the Appalachian Mountains. For a moment, I feared the worst possibility that the thing standing in front of me was not alone. The creature's eyes returned to me, and for the first time I saw something almost human in them. Not emotion exactly, but awareness. A deep understanding that went far beyond animal instinct. It studied me the same way a human hunter studies prey before making a decision. I realized then that the legends describing Dogman encounters were always similar for a reason. Witnesses often said the creature seemed curious about humans rather than immediately hostile. Standing there beneath those towering trees, I felt that curiosity directed entirely at me. I slowly raised my hands, not in aggression but in a gesture meant to show I was not a threat. I had heard stories from wildlife experts who advised remaining calm when encountering large predators, but this situation felt far beyond any normal wildlife encounter. The creature tilted its head slightly again, watching the movement of my hands with intense focus. For a moment the forest was quiet except for the sound of my own breathing echoing inside my chest. Another sound suddenly broke the silence. It came from somewhere deeper in the woods, far beyond the ridge where the creature had growled earlier. It was faint, but unmistakably distant howl echoing across the mountains. The creature immediately turned its head toward the sound. Its ears rose sharply and its posture shifted, becoming more alert and tense. That single reaction confirmed my fear that there were others somewhere in the forest. The Dogman slowly stepped sideways, keeping its eyes locked on me while its body angled toward the darker part of the woods. The movement was smooth and controlled, almost graceful for something of that size. It did not appear afraid of me, but it also did not rush forward like a predator ready to attack. Instead, it behaved like something that had already made its decision. The message seemed clear. I had wandered too close to territory that did not belong to me. For several seconds, the creature simply stared at me, as if making sure I understood the warning. Then it turned its body fully toward the forest and took a single step away. The sound of its foot pressing into the leaves was heavy and deliberate. I expected it to drop to all fours like a wolf, but instead it continued moving upright, disappearing deeper between the trees with long, silent strides. Before it vanished completely, the Dogman paused one final time. Its head slowly turned over its shoulder, and those glowing eyes met mine again through the darkness. That final look carried something deeply unsettling. It wasn't hatred. It wasn't fear. It felt more like recognition, as if the creature wanted me to remember that moment. Then the forest swallowed it whole. Asterisk, for a long moment after the creature disappeared into the darkness. I remained frozen exactly where I stood. The beam of my headlamp shook slightly as my hands trembled, scanning the trees where the towering figure had just vanished. Every instinct told me to leave the forest immediately, yet my legs refused to move. The silence returned.
That's how it is sometimes with Dogman encounters. Your body just locks on you. Not because you don't want to, because of absolutely the pure shock, adrenaline, and basically the knowledge that these things are real. I grew up listening to about this stuff and everything. I grew up listening about the Dogman and all that. And to be honest, it's true. A lot of these Dogman encounters are very true. And everything. So I'm going ahead and leave you with this one and get back with another one. So yeah.